Penn State is still canceling Joe Paterno. Look no further than their brand new stadium naming rights deal. Locked on Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman, 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer, and I want to thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hit that free subscribe button down below so you never miss a single episode. We would really appreciate that. And, of course, we're going to talk about canceling Joe Paterno. It is still happening. We'll talk about this stadium naming rights deal at Happy Valley and Beaver Stadium. And by the way, did they get enough money for this deal? Plus, we'll talk a little bit about 2025 spring football for Penn State. But first, for the next 15 years, Penn State is going to get $50 million, and they're going to call their new stadium West Shore Home Field at Beaver Stadium. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? Some wanted this to be named after Joe Paterno, the legendary and controversial football coach from yesteryear. Now, the board of trustees, they got together and they voted on this. A lot of arguing taking place behind closed doors. And look, it's a good deal. They get a bunch of money, naming rights. It's what we do. Sponsor companies, all that. But a lot of people on the board and a lot of Penn State fans want this stadium named after Joe Paterno. The vote was 22-8. So it was not unanimous, but it wasn't exactly lopsided. I was curious by the tally, both in terms of who voted for the new naming rights deal and those who voted against it because they wanted Joe Pa's name on it. And, there's something to be said about naming after Joe Paterno. If you're a diehard Penn State fan, the longtime legendary coach, in a lot of cases, people growing up, that was the only coach they ever knew because he was there forever. But, dissenters on the board included former players, Paterno players, like quarterback Matt McGloin and Jay Paterno, his son. A lot of people want to call this a transformational vote, a vote to remember the past or a vote to bury the past, forget it, and move on to the future. And there's a lot of new great stuff going on at Penn State. First of all, they're good. They're a good football team on the national stage. They sell out. Now everybody's getting sponsors for this and that naming rights deal. They're just trying to take a step forward into the future. But McGloin said that with this vote, you're trying to erase 46 years as a head coach. Joe Paterno is a complicated topic in Happy Valley. Of course, he was the head coach at Penn State all the way back in 1966 through 2011. Before that, he was an assistant there for 15 years, going back to 1950. And the only place he ever coached was at Penn State, either as an assistant or as a head coach. Along the way, he became the first coach to win over 400 games. He won 24 bowl games. He won national championships in 1982 and 1986, two-time champion. Penn State was undefeated 5 times in his career. He won dozens of Coach of the Year awards. Every year, players just kept getting cranked out to the NFL. It's a football factory there at Happy Valley. I'm actually old enough to remember a lot of Paterno's career, and I'm old enough to remember Penn State's transition into the Big Ten when it became the 11th team. It was weird. It was. As I recall, Joe Paterno was not in favor of the move at first, but, 3 Big Ten titles later, he must have been okay with it. Started to warm up to the idea. But then his career ended suddenly in 2011. The school's board of trustees, they fired him. This was following a very ugly time. I remember that because I had to talk about this on national radio all the time. It was a very uncomfortable subject. It was an ugly child sex abuse scandal that occurred on Joe Paterno's watch involving his former defensive coordinator, Jerry Sandusky, who was accused of doing unspeakable things to a young boy in the Penn State locker room. Paterno was accused by the FBI of concealing info related to Sandusky's abhorrent behavior. Ironically, after he was fired, Paterno died like a few weeks later. It was like the one thing he lived for. He says it was gone. And he was elderly, and he had lung cancer, I believe it was, and he passed away shortly thereafter. The termination, and his family has continued to fight the FBI's findings. So, as you can tell, a lot of people are passionate one way or the other about Joe Paterno, whether it be people, players, family members, the school. A lot of them would prefer that it would be called Paterno Field at Beaver Stadium. And, in case you're thinking this, they're going to get $50 million for the naming rights deal. That's great. And you may be wondering, hey, well, okay, if you name it after a coach, that's kind of ceremonial. There's no money. It's not like Paterno's a company that's going to pay us $50 million, right? There are some trustees that actually believe that the school would have raised more money, like $100 million more, if Paterno's name was on it through private donations. This would not be unusual. There are a lot of schools that have named their stadiums after former head coaches. Alabama is Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. A lot of coaches on that title. Bobby Bowden Field at Florida State's Doak S. Campbell Stadium. And there's Barry Alvarez Field at Wisconsin's Camp Randall, just coming to mind there. But this whole debate, it's never going to go away at Penn State. It's always going to be part of their DNA. But in the meantime, they got this $700 million renovation project going on, continuing at the stadium, and it's going to be shiny and new and really cool. On the business side of this, so West Shore Home, they may have gotten a steal for $50 million over 15 years. That's only $3.3 million a year to be on the second largest stadium in all of America, on one of the most visible programs in the country, and the best conference in the country. Other comparable deals, some are more, some are less. If you go out west and look at Washington's Husky Stadium, they get $4.1 million a year from Alaska Airlines to call it Alaska Airlines at Husky Stadium. Georgia Tech there at Bobby Dodd Stadium. They got a car dealership for $2.75 million with their name on it. Ohio State has a 2-year deal with Save Flight Auto Glass field naming rights for $2.5 million a year. So, somewhere in there in the mix. So maybe they could have got more. But nonetheless, it's a big deal to be doing this at a traditional site like Beaver Stadium at Penn State. I would love to hear from Penn State fans, because I'm curious. Is it going to be as 50-50? Is it going to be divided between you guys that want to, remember the past and Joe Paterno, or are you like, hey, man, let's move on, the next new shiny thing? Curious. Still divisive topic. Love to hear from you with the comments on YouTube. Would love for you to subscribe. It's free. It's instant. Just click that button down below. That way you'll never miss an episode of Locked On Big Ten, and you can follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcasts. And also, if you don't mind, hit that share, follow, and like button as well. A couple other things I want to remind you of. We're on Twitter at Talk Big Ten. Also, our website, talkbig10.com. All of our podcasts go there. If you're new to our podcast, you want to go find the chronological, if you want to catch like yesterday's, or they're also grouped by your favorite school. Obviously, these are going to be listed under Penn State. So go find Penn State, watch all the podcasts that we did, listen to all the podcasts we did on Penn State. We also have links there. If you want to buy Penn State merchandise, for example, all of your favorite Big Ten schools have links. Get shirts, t-shirts, hats, all right there at talkbig10.com for your convenience. So you can check that out as well. All right, I got a final word. We're going to take a peek ahead to the 2025 spring season for Penn State football, among other things. All that in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. It's tax season. Let me tell you about Intuit TurboTax. That's right. I use it. I've used it for like 20 years. It's great. So taxes used to be sitting around waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting and worrying and wondering some more. Now doing taxes is just matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress. So you can focus on your own day. An expert will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything right there. 100% accuracy. And also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now that's doing taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Tell you about Factor. You want some food at the end of the day. You're working. You don't have time to prep. You don't have the groceries. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition, Factor makes eating well easy. How about that? Chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. So you can check that out. I highly recommend it. And just you got like 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week. You can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab and go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. It's so easy, very simple, tastes great, very convenient, unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off and use the code LockedOnCollege50 off. That's the number 50. Get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right. I got a lot going on here with Penn State here today. Thanks for checking us out. Tell your friends about us. We got Penn State's spring blue-white game. It's coming up. Mark your calendars for April 26th. At least they're still having it. Some schools aren't. Got the highest expectations this year. The highest. Penn State, James Franklin, got into the playoffs this year and looking to take that next step and get a championship. All right. And we're going to be covering spring ball, all the practices of the Nittany Lions, as well as the other 17 conference teams right here. Locked On Big Ten. This is the only place you're going to find a podcast that covers all 18 Big Ten teams with news. And we also give you analysis and opinion of that news. We'll offer all of that under one umbrella right here. If you got a Big Ten friend or family member that's an alum, doesn't know we're out here every day, let them know. Word of mouth is great. We would appreciate that if you can help us out. Many ways for you to interact with this podcast. There's Twitter, X at Talk Big Ten, our website, talkbig10.com, merchandise and podcasts right there. And it's talkbig10.com. And be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go and follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app. That way you get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it's available every day, and you won't miss a single episode. I also have some friends at Locked On College Basketball. That's a different podcast. Isaac Shade and Andy Patton will get you going through the rest of the month of March with college basketball. That's Locked On College Basketball. Find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you for checking us out here today. Can't wait till we meet again next time. We're here every day for Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman.